Hi BookTube, it's Amy and it's day 2 of the reading rush. Now it's actually already 4 p.m. here. I didn't have a chance to vlog any earlier in the day, although I did want to because I started reading The Moon and Sixpence by Somerset Maugham on the bus this morning and on my lunch break. I didn't bother to do any vlog bits when I got up this morning or as I was getting ready to take the bus to work because you all saw that yesterday, and so I don't see why you would be interested in seeing the same thing a second time. And well, I thought I might take a walk at lunch again and tell you what I thought of what I had read so far, but that was not to be. I got crunched for time and had to rush off to a meeting that lasted all afternoon. And then I left work a little bit early and I went to get my blood taken. I'm having some blood tests done, just routine stuff. I've got a new family doctor, and his first order of business, so to speak, was to send me off to the lab to get some routine tests done. It was an okay experience, I guess, my first ever blood test in my life. I even asked my mom, I'm like, have I ever had blood taken? And she said, no, you didn't. Not when you were a kid, and not in my adult life until today. So that was an interesting experience. It went a whole lot quicker than I thought it would. Within a few seconds, she had 3 little vials full there, and I guess off that'll go to be tested. And I'm assuming everything's normal because I feel quite healthy, so we'll see. But I did that after work, so obviously I wasn't reading then, and then I thought, I'll just pop right home. It should have taken me about 10 minutes to get home, but my bus got caught up in some sort of police action that was going on. I don't know what was happening, but the road was blocked and they were directing traffic through one lane at a time. And then when my bus goes to go through, the driver realizes that one of the ambulances was pulled too close. It was pulled up on the grass, but it was too close to the edge of the road, and there was a truck on the other side, and if he had tried to go forward, he would have taken off the ambulance's rear view mirror. So we were just casually waiting on this bus in the middle of like 4 police cars and 2 ambulances, and I don't know what all else was there, but there were a lot of police officers taking a lot of people's identification down, so I don't know what happened, but I'm home now, and the plan is to relax a bit, just lie here in bed and read a little bit more of The Moon and Sixpence. I'm not super hungry for dinner yet because I had quite a filling lunch. I had that rice and curry that I made last night, and so it was a little bit more filling than some of my other lunches. And then my meeting that I had this afternoon too, the organizer was kind enough to bring in all sorts of fruit, grapes and cherries and oranges and chocolate bars and little bits of cheese and cider. Not alcoholic cider, no alcohol during the workday, but it was nice to enjoy a few snacks mid-afternoon. But on to the order of business. The order of business is, of course, the reading. I'm about 75 pages into The Moon and the Sixpence. And so far, we have our narrator, who is, well, he seems to be Maugham himself. That often happens in several of his books. The Razor's Edge has a narrator that seems to be Maugham inserted into the story. And if it's not him, he's never specifically named, but if it's not him, then it is a writer version of him that is observing these events. And I think it's telling because the biography of Maugham that I was reading, that I've set aside for this week while I do the reading rush, there are a couple of passages in there about Maugham's life that I'm pretty sure were pulled from this book, just him interacting in society. And the catalyst of this novel really is that he meets this woman who, she's not a writer or an artist herself, Mrs. Strickland, but she hosts dinner parties for writers. She loves to collect lions around her, so to speak, and the narrator actually refers to her as collecting lions, taming the lions, or something along those lines. And she's really no one of consequence, and he perceives her husband as really no one of consequence. In fact, he thinks the husband is boring, the husband is unambitious, and then suddenly he finds out one day, he hears, through the gossip mill, that her husband, Mr. Strickland, Charles Strickland, has up and run off. And everyone assumes that he's run off with a woman. There's talk that this woman from a tea shop disappeared at the same time. But our narrator is put in the awkward position of being sent to Paris by Mrs. Strickland to beg her husband to return to her. She is left essentially penniless. She has no income of her own, and they have 2 young children. And everyone assumes that he's gone off with this woman and that he got all this money, but our narrator has just arrived in Paris to find Charles Strickland not only alone, there's no woman in sight, he hasn't run off with a woman at all, but to find him in a rundown hotel on the shady side of town and claiming he only has £100 to his name. And not only that, but he's run away not because he's fallen in love with someone else or because he finds his wife intolerable. He's run away because he's decided at the grand age of 40 that he needs to be an artist. He needs to paint. And for whatever reason, he can't do that while he stays with his wife. And he can't do that in London. He must do it in Paris for whatever reason. And so that's where I'm at now. And this novel is generally accepted to be loosely based on the life of the artist Gauguin, who Somerset Maugham knew in his life, although I don't think he knew him that intimately, just as the narrator here doesn't know Charles Strickland that intimately. And I'm liking it so far. We've got Maugham's usual beautiful style of writing. So here's something here as I continue to read on. Our narrator says, "If I had been able to report my stout refusal to sit at the same table with a man of such character, but the fear of not being able to carry it out through effectively has always made me shy of assuming the moral attitude, and in this case the certainty that my sentiments would be lost on Strickland made it peculiarly embarrassing to utter them. Only the poet or the saint can water an asphalt pavement in the confident anticipation that lilies will reward his labor." And so he does the exact opposite of what he thinks moral behavior would be, out of fear that he won't be able to maintain this strict moral behavior if he sets out in this path, which I think is interesting to admit that only certain people are able to be completely moral and perhaps, well, it's hard to say whether this is moral or not. It's not really morals. Perhaps it's more along the lines of what he thinks a proper gentleman would do. So there's that. So when I was out last night getting the gin for my gin and tonics, I was oddly surprised to find something in the LCBO that I just had to try because I'd never had it before. And a lot of you are going to laugh at this, but wine in a box, in a carton type thing. I've heard about this, but I've never seen it. I've seen wine in a can, but never in a carton like this. We're oddly very old-fashioned here in Ontario, and for the most part, wine just comes in a bottle. So I thought I would give this Heller Family Vineyards Cabernet Merlot a try. Says they've been making wine for over 50 years, and it's a complex, medium-bodied, fruity richness. The carton says, less bottle, more wine. Easy to pour, easy to store, lightweight, unbreakable, great value. I promise I am not an advertisement. And there's a liter of wine in here. So I'm going to have a glass while I continue to read on here. I am now on page 105, and I am greatly enjoying this. If I had to rate it now, I think it would come as my fourth favorite. Number 1 being Of Human Bondage, number 2 being The Razor's Edge, and number 3 being Mrs. Craddock, and then number 4 being The Moon and Sixpence, number 5 being Cakes and Ale, let's walk over here. Number 6 being Christmas Holiday, number 7 being, I think we'll go with Then and Now as number 7, and number 8 would be The Vagrant Mood. But if I go that way, then I've completely forgotten to take into account Up at the Villa. Up at the Villa would maybe be number 6, and that would displace things along there, but you get the point. You know, all in all, I think it's quite the coincidence that last month I was able to see for myself a large number of Gauguin's portraits and paintings in general, I guess, at the National Gallery here in Ottawa. There was a special exhibit of many of his portraits, and I think it's actually still going because I've still seen the advertisements around, but it's just a coincidence that I was able to see his paintings for myself before embarking on The Moon and Sixpence. And as you can see, I'm close to being done. And although this character is not Gauguin himself and is only based loosely on him, you can see what a horrible person this character is. He has gone and seduced another woman and left her here. And he is constantly telling people to go to hell, which is a little bit funny here. But the way that people are describing his painting here, many people are describing it as a little bit ugly. And I admit, when I saw the Gauguin exhibit at the National Art Gallery here in Ottawa, I was torn between, that's kind of interesting, and I suppose I can see how that could be considered talent, but also the opinion of, God, this stuff is ugly and not very skilled. Ice all over the counter, but that was the price of finally managing to get that final ice cube out of there. Time to make a new tray here. But the point here is that I am returning to this delicious bottle of gin for a little drink here. I have to say, overall, I am quite enjoying this book. I think I'm downgrading it from my 4th favorite to my 5th favorite, though, because it does lag a little bit. And it does seem as though Somerset Maugham is trying a little bit too hard to get his point across about this man who really has no morals. And our narrator is constantly questioning whether this man is suppressing his morals, is fighting against his own human nature, or whether his own human nature really isn't what we would expect it to be. Does he really feel no remorse about the way he treats women and people in general in his life? Or is he suppressing that emotion and convincing himself that he really feels no emotion? It's hard to say. I guess it comes down to, is this asshole a sociopath? Or is he just a cad? Is he just trying to push aside the social conventions and the morals of the day and push aside what we consider humanity? Or has he really lost all sense? Or did he ever really have any sense of what it means to be a human being in society and how to treat other human beings and interact with people? I think it's hard to say here, but overall, not a bad novel. Not one of my favorites. As I said, there are several W. Somerset Maugham novels that I find more interesting than this one, but this is not an uninteresting or horrible novel. It is quite an enjoyable read overall. If I had to label it right now, 3 out of 5 stars on my Goodreads. And 3 out of 5 stars for me means I enjoyed it. It was good, but it was not really good, which is like the 4-star read. And a 5-star read is, oh my God, this book may have possibly changed my life. I'm going to be thinking about it for days and weeks and months and years to come, and I will return to it for contemplation. This is definitely not a book that you return to for contemplation. It is just a semi-enjoyable read. I'm not sure, but I think the alcohol is making me enjoy this novel perhaps a little bit more than I otherwise would have. This is not to say that it's a bad novel, but compared to my favorite W. Somerset Maugham novels, it's perhaps not as good. Frankly, by this point, by page 281, I am about ready for the story to be over. As our narrator said, about 5 years ago at this point was the last time he actually met the artist, and now he is telling us the story based on hearsay. Now, this writing style, this sort of narrator of nonfiction that he's making himself out to be, he does the same thing in The Razor's Edge. And I think in The Razor's Edge, it's executed in a better and perhaps more interesting way. But as I said, this is not to say that this novel is poorly written or that it's bad. It's just not quite at the exceptional level of The Razor's Edge. And I'm not enjoying it quite as much as I did The Razor's Edge.